Hello, welcome to the Construction Cogs Podcast. Today we're going to cover something that's very close to my heart, mental health. My guest is Darren Barden. Darren is a sales manager for Hilti and CEO of iTalk MH Ltd. And he also campaigns for mental health in construction. Darren has got an incredible story to tell. Over 20 years ago, he was stabbed more than 20 times just inside his front door in the middle of the night in a case of mistaken identity. He's written a book. He's appeared on television programs. He's appeared on radio stations, podcasts to talk about his attack and also about the breakdown he suffered years after this event. We can also cover that today. Hope you enjoy. Darren Barden, how are you, fella?
Excellent, thank you, mate. Excellent.
Good man. Thanks so much for coming on, mate. Honestly, I've really been looking forward to this. Really have. It's been great.
Me as well, mate. Me as well. It's been I know we've had a couple of little chats before, and I am really looking forward to this. It's something a little bit different for me as well.
Yeah, I was going to say because you've been on the radio a few times, haven't you? And you've been on television, but we'll talk about all that later.
Yeah,
we'll delve into all that later. But obviously, like you've got a really interesting story. We know this. I've done that in the intro. But obviously, this is a construction podcast, so there's a couple of areas that you're involved with in construction. We'll touch on the first one, your day job. So
yeah.
you work for Hilti, didn't you?
Yes, I'm an account manager for Hilti, and specifically in the tool hire industry side of things.
So what does that involve then exactly? What's your day-to-day work life like?
Basically, what we do is we're going around the tool hire companies, either into the tool hire companies, the depots, the offices. We introduce new tooling, innovation, show them, what and how these things work, because most people in the construction industry know how a drill works, how a breaker goes, but sometimes there's a little bit more to it, and understanding how to get the best from these tools. So we show them that. We then go to site as well sometimes if they have problems on site, or certain applications that they're not sure on what's the best equipment to use. So we go and help them and advise on that front. So that side of things, getting on site, I really love. That's brilliant fun.
Yeah, it's a bit you that is it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because was it hard to get into? I understand you went for quite a rigorous employment process. Is that right?
Yes, it was, mate. Yeah, I think there's a 5-step. I'm sure it's about 5 steps, 5 interviews you go through, and there was like this particular day where you go along and you have to present yourself, and there's a group of people. It was almost like being on the The Apprentice, that type of thing. It felt like, but it was actually really good. And it gave you a chance to basically showcase yourself. When I first looked at joining Hilti, I thought, oh, this looks all right, But by the time I got through the interview process, I was like, I so want this. This is right up my street, you know what I mean? And it's proved to be that, And Hilti have been brilliant with me. They support my mental health work as well,
Good.
So. They've been absolutely fantastic, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. If I'm working for someone, working for Hilti's, for me, they're a brilliant company to work for.
How much they paid you to say that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the check's on its way. They don't pay me enough in the day job.
Yeah. No, I mean, it must have been weird to go through such a process as a middle-aged man. I started an apprenticeship at 35, and I had a similar thing, loads of different interviews, and go for a long day with all these tests and dexterity tests and group assessments and all that. I thought, whoa, what is all this about, So it's mad. So, yeah, fair play to you, mate. Get through it.
Well, when I joined and I got started, you then go to Manchester to their head office, and you do 3 weeks training, but over a period of time. And it was the first time I was back in a classroom for 30 odd years. I left school with virtually nothing.
Yeah.
And here I am sitting in a classroom learning so much, you know what I mean? It was amazing. And stuff that I thought I knew about on the sales side of things, I clearly didn't, and they were teaching that. But it was an incredible, that experience for me was fantastic, to be back in a classroom. And I was nervous about that. I'm not Mr. Academic, by any stretch of the imagination, but to be back in a classroom, learning what I learned, to pass the exams how I passed them. They're not particularly difficult, but they do push you, especially if you're not used to learning. The whole experience from the interview process right the way through to being onboarded and then getting your actual job, your day job with them, and onwards was actually brilliant.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a great achievement, and it great gives you a big sense of worth as well, particularly after what you've been through and all that. Especially like, you know, we'll touch on this later, but when you felt so low and felt like you weren't worth anything and all that sort of stuff, to be able to go and do this, and it's growth, isn't it? Knowing that you can do
Yeah.
something and learn something new, it's growth.
Well, the other important part is the construction industry. I've been in and out of over the years, various roles, and it's something I enjoy. And this gave me the best of both worlds.
Yeah, yeah,
To mess around with the tools, to get on sites as well, but not necessarily actually work in the construction industry. And
yeah,
that part of it was brilliant because, without a shadow of a doubt, my best learning come from the people on site.
yeah, yeah,
And you got them all, male, female, all ages, all different cultures, all coming to you with different experiences, and you're just learning all the time. The terminology you learn, someone calls one thing this, someone calls it something else, and you've got to try and bridge the gap. So
yeah.
yeah, it's I'm 9 years in, and it's
Oh, really?
that part of it is it's a phenomenal industry, a fantastic company to work for.
Yeah,
They they introduced me to something called work-life balance, which, as someone who'd only ever worked for small companies before, I didn't really know existed. I didn't believe in it. I'd heard the phrase, but they genuinely believe in it.
yeah.
They want you to enjoy life, have a family life, have a personal life, and to succeed at work. So the culture's really cool there, really cool.
That's wicked. There's not many companies out there that are like that, are they? Really? Especially in
Oh,
construction.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
cool.
during the COVID years, that period of lockdown, not once did I doubt whether I had a job to go back to. When we was on furlough and things like that, and that's a fortunate position to be in.
Yeah,
Because there was people out there losing their jobs, their livelihoods, their houses. The whole world went to pot, but I was fairly comfortable. I knew there was something to go back to. They're that good a company. They stayed in touch with you via training, which was a brilliant idea. It was, for me, it was one of the things you could just keep in touch with all your workmates without actually being in touch from a work point of view, because we weren't allowed to discuss work, but
yeah,
we could do the training. So that was good as well. I think that was an added plus, for everybody.
yeah. But also, obviously, you've got another business now of your own, which we'll talk about a
Yeah.
bit later. But before you had that, I mean, you'd had businesses in the past. So how was it? I bet it was a relief when it actually being employed by someone without all the stresses of running your own business and all that sort of stuff. So just go and do a day job and not stress.
Oh, 100%. When I first joined Hilti, I actually thought the first year was like being on holiday. It's like, well, hang on. For one something doing, someone else does it. You
Yeah,
need
yeah,
business cards, someone gets it, uniform, someone gets it, the van needs a service, someone sorts it out. It was like, it was genuinely like a holiday.
yeah,
I weren't used to it. It was a massive cultural shock for me, but in a positive way. So
yeah,
that side of things, I really, really enjoyed that part of it. You know, given my time again, I'd have loved to have stayed in business, as I was, when you got that full control of your diary, when you're really in charge of that. And I totally get why people want to stick with that. But there's a lot to be said for being in full-time employment, with
yeah.
a company,
Oh,
especially
absolutely.
one like Hilti.
100%. I mean, I'm the same. I can leave the site, go home, and that's it. I don't even think about site. That's it, just all
Yeah.
night. But yeah, I can be. I mean, I've been self-employed before, and waking up in the middle of the night worrying about things and stressing that I've done something or forgotten something. It's not for me. I'm all from living for my family. When I'm here, I want to be here with them.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
my
So
my days. I can remember when I had my business years ago. We hadn't had a holiday for about 6 years. We couldn't afford one. We was always skin. Anyway, I got to the stage where I think my mum and dad gave us some money for Christmas, and we took the kids to Tenerife for a holiday for a week over Christmas. It was either Tenerife or Lanzarote, one of those type of places. And they got this water park there, and the kids were little, and they were like, this is Boxing Day, and they're on this man-made beach with the waves coming in, and I'm pacing up and down, sorting out wet weather suits for blokes back in England. This is Boxing Day, and I'm
yeah,
like, that's not right. You know what I mean? My
yeah.
time should have been with my family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you with that. Yeah. So, I mean, you talk about work-life balance, which is involved with mental health. You're campaigning for mental health in construction, now, aren't you? Right. I want to ask you why, but let's go right back to the root of this. Why you started this? You've written a book about it.
Yep.
What's the book called?
let's skip to the good bits.
Let's
I
get to the good
always have a
bits.
copy next to me.
Good man. That's
So
it. We'll plug that.
yeah, so it's I mean, really, the book started everything. So and it was years and years after the actual event that took place. So
Yeah.
from my point of view, the book was the catalyst of all the trauma I've been through to then put it into perspective, and probably more so for myself than anybody else.
Yeah.
So that side of things, right in the book, and as I said earlier, I'm not particularly academic. I'd been told by quite a few people, you should write a book. You should write a book, and I don't even read books. How do I write one? So
Yeah.
and then I discovered this guy called Richard McMahon, and he'd done a free seminar over at Heathrow. And it was a 4-hour seminar where he taught you everything, how to go and write a book, publish a book, self-publish a book in this 4-hour period. I come home and I was like, that was brilliant, but I'm never going to do this on my own. Not in a million years. And I can't remember how much he was. I think it was about 1,500 quid, something like that. You paid him to mentor you for a year.
Okay.
And he helped you through the process. So everything in the book is me, it's my words, it's my writing. And they just help you through the process and help you get it. And back then, it was a godsend. I would have never have done it if I'd left my own devices. It would have just been one of those things I always thought about and never got around to. So when I discovered Richard McMahon, and he said to me, we'll get this done. And it was just like literally just over a year from starting it to getting it published, which was phenomenal. For me.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it first arrived, the books arrived. That is a major moment, I tell you. Absolutely major moment.
I can imagine. I mean, I know at Arley's, I wrote a novel. It took me about 8 years and a complete rewrite on and off to do it, and it's still not finished.
There's little things like, when you're setting out the chapters, and the chapter titles and things like that, and it's not until you get someone from outside of your world to contribute do you really understand that actually these people know what they're talking about. This is why you pay them.
Yeah.
So the little things, the chapter titles, the tweaks they done, how they made it relevant to what I'd written and things like that was absolutely brilliant. And Richard said to me when I launched my book, he said, listen, you'll invite about 100 people. He said, you'll probably get about 50 of them respond. He said, if you get 30 people turn up, he said, you'll be doing really well. So I said, right, okay, then brilliant. So I'd hired this room at this local hotel to where I live. And anyway, I had 130 people turn up.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It was mad.
All by invitation, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Well, basically, they some of them turned up I didn't know were coming. Some old school people and things like that.
Wicked.
Yeah, it was amazing. And there was this hall of 130 people, my mum and dad in there. My kids had helped me write a script, so I knew what I was going to say. And I threw the script out the window and just chatted for 20 minutes.
Mate, honestly, I've seen some horror stories because I'm on writing communities on Twitter, and some of them post things like when they do book launches and that, and they show pictures and there's literally 0 people there, and they're just like, I've absolutely distraught. It's like your worst nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were lucky.
Like organising your own birthday party and no one turns
up.
Oh,
don't. Yeah, so you was lucky in that respect. So is it doing well, the book? It's doing all right?
Well, the funny thing is, it was 6 years ago now I launched it, and there's not many months go past where it doesn't sell. Nearly pretty much every month I sell 1 or 2 copies. Listen, some months I get 3.5 quid from Amazon, you know what I mean? So, but there's times when I get 30 odd quid and, 40 quid here and there. I think my biggest month over the last couple of years was about £70 in royalties. So it's not, I'm not going to be retiring early off the back of it.
Nah, but it's more about getting the message out there, isn't it, and helping people, I think. Can you talk about what the book's about? I don't want to delve too much about it because I want to talk about your well, I do want to talk about the event, but also mainly what happened afterwards, like the breakdown, how it affected and that sort of stuff. So can you give the viewers a little bit of an insight?
Yeah, absolutely. So 28 years ago now, I got a knock on the door on a Monday night at midnight. Back then I was doing 2 jobs. We were skin. So, to pay the bills, I had a 1-year-old son, so we were struggling to make the bills. So that's why I was doing the 2 jobs. And you've got to bear in mind as well, this is not a time when we had mobile phones. They certainly weren't readily available. And, so I got this knock on the door on a Monday night and I thought, right, I've overslept for my night job. So I ran downstairs. My wife was in another room with my son because he was teething at the time. And I ran downstairs in my pants, ready to just say, look, I'll be there in a couple of minutes. I thought I'd overslept. And as I opened the door up, without checking through the spy hole, I even put a spy hole in because of where I lived. Didn't use it, just didn't even think anything would happen along those lines. So as I've opened the door and looked out, there was two guys stood there. The one to the right looked the opposite way and just nodded, and then they just sort of ploughed forward. So I can remember sort of having my hands out in front of me. And then I don't know really what happened. There's a point where I don't know if I was unconscious, whether my memory's playing havoc with me, I had a blackout, whatever. But then I remember being on the floor in sort of like a fetal position, curled up, and I could just feel my head being battered from side to side. So at this point, I don't know I've been stabbed at all. I just thought I'm being beaten up. I don't know what's happening. Just woke up in the middle of the night, and here I am copping a bit of an hiding. So it was, so my head was going backwards and forwards. And apparently I was screaming all sorts of stuff, like my wife could hear me. Because she thought she heard some nutcase knock on the door. And it was the nutter knocking and screaming at me. She didn't realise it was me.
Right.
Until she then started to realise, when it went a bit quiet, she realised it was me, So, and then they just stopped. They just stopped and walked away.
Yeah.
There was an eyewitness out walking his dog. By the time he walked his dog back to his flat and then went to the telephone box to dial 999, it had sort of pretty much finished.
Yeah.
So apparently there was four of them. So two come in, one waited at the end of the path where my house was at the end of the street, and the other one was in the getaway car waiting to drive off. So,
and
that was it. That's when it all began. That moment.
Yeah. So I mean, how lucky are you to be here now? You're obviously meant to be here for a reason, ain't you? To be able to survive that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's once again, I was 29 years old when it happened. We had a 1-year-old son. So life had to carry on.
Yeah.
And I was for the want of a better phrase, I was a bloke. I was a geezer. I was in the pub. I was telling jokes. We was doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You're just out grafting, doing what you can to earn a living, and then something just reshapes your whole world. But you don't have time to digest it. You don't have time to go, what has happened?
Yeah.
Because number one, I was a bit nuts for a while. I know we shouldn't really use the word nuts in the mental health word, but I talk. So my cousin always called me a fully qualified mentalist, which I was for a long time. For months and months, and then all of a sudden you got to pay your bills.
Yeah.
I've got to get back to work. And the only thing stopping me going to work was me. It wasn't physically, because I had a load of stitches and a load of cuts. That weren't stopping me going to work. It was what was going on in the head that was stopping me.
Yeah. This is when it all went a little bit peaked on, and it all kind of spiraled a little bit after that, wasn't it?
Absolutely, but even then, to be fair, it was all those years later when I went through what we now know is PTSD. That was the worst part. I often use this phrase that if someone ever gave me the choice to have the stabbing or the mental health, like the suicide, not the suicide attempt, the suicide thoughts, I'd take the stabbing all day long. You can, if that was my only choice I had, stab away, because it was nowhere near as bad as the mental health issues I had 13, 14 and 15 years after. That was far worse.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can relate to that. It's when you're inside your own head, it's not a nice place to be sometimes at all. It's the worst place to be. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It's that side of things. When you get there, it's irrelevant of how your journey takes you there. People get to that stage for many different reasons. But when you're in that position, as I ended up being, and we'll talk about it as we go on, but that was really, really tough. That was the toughest time of my life.
Yeah. So the attackers haven't been caught, have they? Never been caught?
No one ever caught.
No. Have you forgiven them?
You know what? It's really strange, because my mum and dad always wanted someone to pay for what happened to me.
Yeah.
And even now, my mum has trouble watching these interviews. It broke her heart reading the book, because when she read the book, she didn't know about what I'd been through. The first time she knew of it was when she read the book, and it broke her heart. To think her little boy, this little thing, she wiped me backside and taught me to ride a bike and all that sort of stuff, was suddenly on the edge of taking his own life, and that devastated us. So it wasn't just me that had to go through it. It's that little ripple effect of people living it. But yeah, so it's a tough journey when you're in that dark place. But it's hard to reach out and get help. It really is, and like I say, we can cover that in a little bit more when we get into more detail. But
well, to be honest, I say, I never really fully understand what true forgiveness means. Do you know what I mean? When people say, when all these bad things happen to them, and you say, where you get religious people and stuff like that, I forgive you and that, but I don't really know what it means. I mean, does it mean, if you forgive them, does it mean, you'd let them into your house and have a cup of tea with them and chat with them and share your food with them and care for them? I mean, do you know what I mean?
I'm saying, for me, what upsets me is my wife's the same as well. She would want someone to come forward and go, listen, it was we done it. It was a mistake. Because there was always people out there suggesting that because of how I speak, where I lived and things like that, there was always people suggesting, maybe I had something to do with it. And that's so far from the truth. But for me, it was such a different place because I knew it wasn't for me and it had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
I was fairly content with the fact it happened, and it was nothing personal. It was just whatever they got told to do. If they were told to do it, paid to do it. So I didn't struggle with that,
right.
Whereas my mum and dad and my wife did, and that was but that's what upsets me more, to think they were struggling with that as opposed to me struggling with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get that. But you mentioned earlier about your PTSD after. So when did it hit you? When did you know that it hit you that you had problems?
So I started. It was really funny. A friend of mine, Terry, phoned me up. Now Terry lives up near Liverpool, and me and him have been friends. We've done a little bit of work together, business wise, in the rail industry, construction industry, and we spoke probably half a dozen times a year on the phone, and maybe met up once or twice a year. And he phoned me out of the blue and he said to me, "You're all right?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm fine, mate." He said, "Oh, just checking you are." I said, "Right, okay then, what do you want?" He said, No, I'm just phoning to make sure you're all right." Now, at the time, I took no notice of this at all. It was only when I look back on it, I was obviously giving something out to some people, something was going wrong. And then I started getting a bit of paranoia kicking in, and I started sort of disliking certain people and making excuses. And then I had eventually what was called catastrophic thinking. So I was creating problems that weren't there with certain things. And then I was starting to not only imagine these problems, I was then blaming people for them. Yeah. And they weren't even a problem, let alone anyone to blame. But I started creating this sort of false environment, which was just the beginning of the downward spiral. But it was funny enough, it was a Boxing Day again. I was actually around my mother and father-in-law's having dinner, and my wife, my daughter, and my mother-in-law were in the kitchen. Me and my father-in-law just sat at the dining table, just having a chat, and he'd had a bit of a cold for about 3 weeks. And he said to me, he said, "I don't warn you for this." He said, "When you get old." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, this getting ill." He said, "It's not good." And he was looking at me, and all of a sudden it dawned on me what he was saying. Whether he'd done it deliberately or not, I don't know. But it really was my wake-up call, because I think he was saying if anything happened to him, I needed to be there to look after his daughter.
Yeah.
And I clearly I couldn't even look after myself at the time. I wasn't in the right state.
Yeah.
And it was that moment where I suddenly thought, you know what? I need to sort myself out. I really do. And then my friends were coming down, I think 2 days after that, they were driving down from Yorkshire, because Wendy had been phoning them and telling them, "Look, I'm not right, I'm struggling." And I'd had these tablets, the sertraline, 50 milligrams of sertraline, which is the mental health tablet. And some people call them happy pills, whatever you like to call them. But I'd had it kicking around for about 3 months, and I just refused to take them because I didn't want to be beaten by this, what was called mental health at the time. I thought, no, I've got this. I'm a bloke. I can deal with this. And anyway, we had the Boxing Day with my father-in-law where he just said, you need to sort of up your game, without saying it. And then my friends were due down, and I was like, I can't be in this state when they get here.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know they were coming for that reason. I just thought they were coming down to visit us. And so I took the first tablet, and I sat there, me and my wife sat there, and I cried. I got to tell you, mate, I cried my eyes out.
Yeah.
I was inconsolable. I sobbed and sobbed because I felt like I'd lost.
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
lost to this thing called mental health, mental ill health.
Yeah.
It felt like a disaster. But literally the day after, I woke up and it was like a celebration. I took the second one and I was like, I've got this. So
Yeah.
it's, that placebo effect they talk about
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
kicks in. I'm like, yeah, I've got this. And that was really the turning point for me.
Yeah, that was the indicator. Yeah, so yeah, you mentioned like the macho thing. I'm a man, got to be strong. I think there's a bit of a social expectation of men in there. You got to be strong. You got to provide. You got to be dependable. You can't show weakness. You can't show vulnerability. And I think that's what half the problem is for most people. And it sounds like what you went through a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, it's, I would have thought most blokes are vulnerable at some point.
Yeah,
But we don't, as you just said, we don't want to show that vulnerability.
yeah,
And we want to, even to ourselves, when you look yourself in the mirror, you want to be able to see a man standing there, and looking back at you going, right, you've got this,
yeah,
you're going out, you're earning a living, you're going to put a roof over, all the usual stereotypical stuff we talk about, but it's real. It's not
yeah,
just, when they say it's stereotypical, it's real to most of us. And it was to me, I didn't want to be seen to be a weak person, and people finding out I was sitting on the kitchen floor crying my eyes out and things like that. I didn't want people to know that about me. I wanted them to know I was first at the bar, last at the bar. I was the one making the jokes in the pub and the clown at the parties, and I didn't want them to see that drivelling wreck
yeah,
that I was really.
yeah.
So, but obviously, ultimately now it's not a problem. You can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, they do say the people that have got the biggest smiles are often the ones who are suffering the most, don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, it's important. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, this is a big thing for me. A lot of people should be listening to this, hopefully, and think, because I mean, you're old school, aren't you? So it was only in 1961. It was before that it was illegal to try to kill yourself.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's changed, and it is slowly getting there, but it's still not there yet, is it? Really, it's still a little bit of a stigma, and I mean, I think it's everybody's responsibility to change it. But I watched this thing the other day, a TED talk, and a woman was talking about it, and she was saying there is a way that women can help because, I mean, I've read your book. I know your Wendy's an absolute diamond, and she's helped you out so much. But I mean, there's some women that like you talk to them and they're like, oh, you're a bit of, try and ridicule him a little bit. Like this woman's actually saying that she spoke to a friend and she got rid of her fella because he was showing his vulnerable side and saying how bad he felt and all that. And I think if people can just change that and it can help people. I want to talk about men because obviously we're both blokes and that. I don't really know how women feel because I don't women,
Yeah.
but it will help us want to be able to talk and be vulnerable and put ourselves out there, rather than just blocking it in. And then it came to a stage where it just had to come out of you, didn't it? At some point, it had to
Yeah.
come out.
It did. Then it's no one's fault. Men are men, women are women, and that's how we're built.
Yeah,
And there are some women out there that want, for the want of a better phrase, a man.
yeah,
When you're showing that vulnerability to some, that's not being a man, and even to some women, they find it difficult.
yeah,
They do find it difficult. So it's that side of things. You're dead right. The women can help.
yeah,
Obviously, on the reverse side of that, men can help with the women's mental
yeah.
health as
Absolutely,
well. Being
absolutely.
more
Yeah,
compassionate and understanding. But as you said, from a man's point of view, we've got to they've got to understand that a little bit more,
yeah,
as well, and not put so much pressure on that, that alpha male person that he expected. Maybe the guy they met isn't the man they are now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
For whatever reasons, life, age, whatever it is. Maybe it's a slight change they've gone through, and maybe they need to be a little bit more empathetic towards that situation. Some of
Yeah,
them.
yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But like I say, I mean, I'm lucky with my wife, and as I say, you've been lucky. I mean, you put your Wendy through some shit, didn't you, back then? And she stuck by
Yeah,
you through thick and thin. So
yeah.
they say a good man needs a strong woman behind him. So I think we're lucky in that respect.
Well, I wouldn't be in there if it wasn't for her, So
Exactly that, exactly. So what have I got here? Do your family ever worry that you're going to slip back in?
yeah, I think I think once my mum and dad understood it more and I started speaking to them about it, when they read the book, first of all, that was a shock to them. That was a big shock because they had no idea. It's the only person in the world that knew was Wendy.
Yeah.
My friend Rob, I used to go for a walk with my friend Rob on a Friday. We'd walk about 8 or 10 miles, end up in a pub, have a few beers, and then and when he read the book, he said to me that when you were suicidal, that was when we were doing our walks. I said, yeah. He said, well, how comes I didn't know?
Yeah.
You don't, and this is when we all keep telling people to reach out, and it's right. If people have got it in them to reach out, then brilliant. That's what you want. Ideally, that's great. Reach out for help. But from a lived experience that I've been through, is that's the last thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to reach out and ask for help because back to all those things we just spoken about.
Yeah.
That means I'm weak. That means I'm vulnerable. That's not being a man. All of those things, and that's why you end up keeping it into yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tough one, and it's a transition you got to go through. And when I do the talks that I do, whether it be at schools, whether it be in construction companies, the one thing I say to everybody, there's this number banded around that 1 in 4 of us are struggling with our mental health or have had mental health issues. And the big thing I focus on with those is actually that means there's 3 in 4 of us to look out for the 1 in 4.
Absolutely.
And the only way you're going to get anywhere with that is by asking the question of your friends, your family, your workmates, asking them, are they okay? Chances are they're going to go, yeah, I'm fine. We've all done it. Yeah, I'm fine. And actually, you're struggling.
Yeah.
But then ask again. And at some point, they might go, you know what? No, I've got this mortgage the size of bloody, Big Ben. I've got bills coming out of my ears. I can't put food on the table. And then all of a sudden it alleviates that bit of pressure, but they were never going to tell anyone.
Yeah. But I think talking is key, but listening is really important, because people say things without giving everything away. And if you can catch on to something and they think, hang on a minute, and you think, and all of a sudden, sometimes people, when you talk to them, they start letting things out, don't they? So rather than because some people, what they do is they actually they wait for their turn to speak, don't they, before while in a conversation, rather than actually listen to somebody else and then talking, they wait for their turn to speak. But if you actually listen to someone, take in what they're saying, and then hopefully then they can give you something, and then you can help them out.
Well, the thing is, it's important. One of the important rules: if someone opens up to you, number one, listen to it. Obviously, that's absolutely vital. But don't try and fix it.
Yeah.
99 times out of 100, you're not the expert. You're not the professional here that's going to fix it for them.
Yeah.
But they need to know they can confide in you. You can signpost them to where you want if need be. But it's you can't go around fixing everybody's problems. But going back to what you were saying a minute ago, that watching out for your friends, your colleagues, your workmates. You sent me a message recently, and it was typical of the messages I receive. Obviously, because people know my story, and your message started with, "You okay for a quick chat?" Right now, I've had that hundreds of times over the last God knows how many years. The last couple of decades, where when a conversation starts with, "Are you okay for a quick chat?" or "Have you got 5 minutes? I want to have a chat." That triggers a little warning sign. I think they've got problems.
Yeah.
So. And I asked you, didn't I? I asked you straight after. And actually, we just wanted to chat about today, But it's one of those things. If you can spot those little signs, those little little bits in the conversation, or maybe one of your mates has gone a bit quiet in a WhatsApp chat, or you'll meet on a Wednesday and go to the pub for a few beers, and suddenly he's been dropping out of them, And it's those things, rather than going, "Oh, what's up with that miserable sod?" Ask him. Is everything all right, mate? No, you haven't been in the chat, or you haven't been at the pub lately as much as normal, or you're shooting off early from the football, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just ask a question. It might be nothing, but it's always worth asking.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, actually, because to cover this, and also what we were saying before about being open to men, make sure men are all right. We've just sent, so this weekend we just got back from sending my boy up to the army college for the powers. Teenage boy. Obviously, it was quite stressful leading up to it. It was it done her head in a little bit, and I had to put things back for what I'm doing here a little bit. So, and on the way back, my wife said to me, "It's funny. everyone we spoke to, they've always asked me how I'm doing, but they've never asked you how you are. And I'm like, I know, it's funny, that, isn't it? Yeah. So, and yeah, so she said, yeah. So I messaged your mates like because I'm in the group chat, just keep an eye on Jim, yeah. And funny enough, they said to me like, "Oh, you've been a bit quiet, Jim. You all right, mate? You're all good." Yeah, cheers, boys. I'm just absolutely frantic. So that is right. Just keep in touch with people.
And
Absolutely.
that's all it needs is that little listen rear for you. It's. I
Yeah.
mean, I had someone. I've done a charity golf day a few years back, and I've done a little talk afterwards. Raising money for I can't remember what knife campaign it was, anti-knife campaign, and one of the young guys come up to me in the pub after, and he was 23 years old, and he said to me, "Listen, really appreciate what you're doing." He said, "I've had 3 attempts on my life. Right? He tried taking his own life 3 times,
Yeah.
and I said, right, okay." And he was with all his mates. They were all there at this golf day, and he said, none of them know. The only person that knows is my mum. Right?
Wow.
And I was like, it took me back. I wish I'd known now, then what I know now,
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
I was thinking, well, mate, just tell them, like, why don't you just tell? But it's not that easy. And I
Yeah.
felt it was a bit sad to think he's got all these mates, they've grown up together, and he couldn't tell them how he was feeling. And that was a
Yeah.
shame. I mean, listen, he's gone and got help and he's doing just fine now, so, which is brilliant. But yeah, we're just a bit rubbish at it sometimes, talking
Yeah.
to each other.
Yeah.
However, there is a myth when they say men don't talk, and this is something I've only learned recently from a good friend of mine, Paul Vittles, who does a lot of work in suicide prevention. And 90% of all male suicides, the guy that's chose to take their life by suicide has been in contact with some form of authority or organisation within the last 2 months before they took their own life. 90% of men are
Wow.
speaking out.
Yeah.
It's falling on deaf ears or it's going into a system that's possibly broken or not fit for purpose. So when they say men don't talk, we do. We're just not talking to each other. And I genuinely think if we can get more men looking out for their mates,
Yeah.
being a bit more open and honest with this subject, that will save lives. We won't have to rely on the broken systems and the organisations that are not coping to save us.
Do you think the system is broken?
Yeah, I mean, if you look, I think it's 111 now, just launched the fact that you can click mental health on there.
Right.
I mean, how long have we been speaking about mental
Yeah.
health?
Yeah.
And only now. Now, listen, these large organisations, it's not like they're on a speedboat and they can just change direction. This is a cruise line that takes a lot to turn. But how many years has it taken to get that part on mental health? And mental health is quite a burden to the NHS
Yeah.
because it's draining on the system. So it's not their fault. It's no one's real fault, I don't believe. But it's just taken so long. And
Yeah.
you've got to ask yourself why.
I'm not sure there's enough resources. I don't know what it is. Yeah. I mean, I read in your book that you did when you did reach out to one of these organisations, you filled out the forms and you spilled your guts out all over it and then you didn't get anything back, did you? No contact.
No, it was a strange one actually because I I decided I'm going to go to the doctors. I booked the doctor's appointment to go and tell them, and I booked it on a fictitious excuse. I told them I had an itchy boob or something like that, like an
Yeah.
itch on my chest, and that was just to get the doctor's appointment and basically to get me in front of them. I'd done it myself, and it was a massive day, a massive day to be booking the appointment in the first place and going there. And eventually I went in and I sat in the waiting room. When you push the screens and the name comes up. Anyway, it's a different doctor's name that come up. And I went to reception and said to her, look, I said I booked an appointment with my doctor, and there's a different one come up on the screen. I don't want a different one because you've got to imagine I'm fretting over this situation just going in there.
Yeah.
And she said, no, it's okay. He's training. But when I sat down, I started working myself up. I thought, I don't want someone else in the room when I'm telling them all my emotions. Anyway, when I walked in the room, my doctor was sitting round to one side, and this trainee or person training was in his chair. And they both said, hello, Darren, nice, pleasant welcome, And I just went into meltdown. I was swearing, shouting at them, and I was pointing fingers, going, I mean, the words I used was I had to book 3 appointments after to apologise. It was that bad. And I basically said to him, you get up and you swap seats now, otherwise I'm walking out this door and you won't see me again because I'll be dead. Now, obviously, it's a shock to them because they thought I've gone in there with an itchy chest,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but the doctor was brilliant. He settled me down. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk in the end. I got to the stage where I got really hyperventilated and I was just in the right state. But then he said to me, right, listen, you need help. And he wrote a little yellow post-it note out with a phone number for Mind on it. And he said, go and phone them. Away you go. Now, at the time, I thought, right, that's brilliant. When I look back on it, that was rubbish. It was so rubbish. And it's not his fault. I'm not blaming the doctor at all. He was a good doctor and he was good to me on so many occasions. But then I got home, I phoned the number and it was an answer phone. And it's like, hang on a minute. But on the answer phone message, it said go onto our website. So I've gone onto the website. And then you have to fill a questionnaire in. And I'm filling this questionnaire in. And I am literally, as you said a little while ago, pouring my guts out on this questionnaire. And I'm crying my eyes out while I'm filling this form in. And it gets to the end and this thing pops up and just says, we're really concerned about your welfare. Someone will be in touch within 24 hours. Anyway, I think it's about 6 or 7 years later when I wrote the book and I got Steph Shilton, Peter Shilton's wife, to write in my book. That was the first contact I'd had with Mind from that day onwards.
Mad, isn't it? That's bad, isn't it?
Once again, that's not disrespecting Mind. They're a charity. They're just under-resourced, underfunded, undermanned. And so it wasn't anyone's fault at all. It was just how it was.
Yeah.
But it left me nowhere.
Yeah. Do you work with them now at all, Mind?
Yeah, I do. I've done some bits in the past. I've raised some money for them, quite a few grand I've raised for them, which I enjoy doing. They provide a good service, and all the charities do. Whatever walk of life you come from, whether you got drug abuse going on, whether it's alcohol, whether it's gambling, there's an abundance and plethora of charities. I think we've got about 33,000 charities in the UK. It's a phenomenal amount of charities, and none of us could survive without these charities. They're doing such good work because they're forcing the agenda with governments. They're almost a backboard for the NHS as well in some cases. Because people will go to the charities or end up at a charity door, rather than with the NHS. So they're vital. They're absolutely vital to everything that we're going to struggle with going forward. But that can't be the answer because it's so tough for people to run a charity and finance it.
Yeah.
And, that's why when I created iTalk, a friend of mine, Alan Saville, who does suicide prevention, he's got his own charity called Ian's Chain, which is brilliant. He saved way over 100 lives, talked them out of a suicidal situation. He also does a lot of work in domestic violence. He's a phenomenal guy, but me and him sat down, must be 4 or 5 years ago now. We just said, look, we've got to stop doing this work for nothing. We can't keep doing it. It weren't sustainable. And it wasn't about making money out of people and out of sorrow and things like that. It wasn't that at all. It was just actually every time we went and done something, it was costing us. It was, and it's not a mercenary thing. It's just actually, no, it's costing me 30 quid on a train and 15 quid in lunch and things like that. And all of a sudden, I'm going out to do things for charities and it was costing me over £100 a time.
Yeah.
And then when you're there, they're asking for donations.
This is it. So, Yeah, so if you can make money out of it, then you can provide the proper resources for people in that respect.
Yeah.
I'm glad
That's exactly what I want to do.
I'm glad you mentioned iTalk. Let's delve into that then. What is iTalk MH Ltd?
So iTalk MH Ltd is a mental health service, a mental health partner for predominantly construction companies, although it's transferable across industries. But because of my background within construction, that's where my focus is, and that's what I want to focus on initially. So what happened was a couple of years ago, my friend John, he had a death by suicide on site. And he phoned me up. He said, Darren, look, we've had this suicide on site. It's impacted everybody. It's really brought the site down. He said, can you develop a mental health room for me? He said, so a room where I can have it on site. So I said, yeah, I'll have a look at that for you. I started doing some research and work into it. And I phoned him up and said, listen, mate, you can't have a mental health room, not on a building site. Your average, alpha male, the stereotypical man that we were talking about earlier, doesn't want to walk through a door that's got a sign above that says I'm nuts, because that's in effect how they would perceive it, So I said, we're not going to be able to do that, mate, and make it work, So that's when I came up with iTalk, the app,
Yeah.
suicide prevention app. So the idea was it was all about prevention as opposed to cure. So I don't want to be a counsellor for people. You listen, I'll give anybody help. If ever they need it, I can talk to them through lived experience. But I don't want to be the counsellor. There's people out there far better equipped than me to do that.
Yeah.
What I want to do is be able to get them in, show them some of the things that life can bring, the hurdles and the challenges. So, whether it's financial, whether it's mortgages, pensions, insurances, CIC, all the things that you'll come across mostly in the construction game, banking, that type of stuff, tax and VAT, and bring professionals in and talk to them about that, because those life skills sometimes are what cause you anxiety. They're what's cause you stress, which can then end up in, sourcing and out from it. You're struggling because your wife wants a mortgage, but you haven't got a clue what you're doing. You're working all hours. So then you just avoid the conversation. You end up in a pub, 3 pints turns to 5, 5 turns to 7. Then all of a sudden it's neat vodka when you get home from work, or it could be gambling. It's your little escapism. And that's where you end up at the door of suicide.
Yeah.
Because you're not coping with anything. And in a lot of cases, it's because we're shying away from it.
Yeah.
So iTalk was born out of this suicide on site, and it was then needed. I needed to get to the people who needed it most. So just having an app for me wasn't how it should be. There's 1,000 apps out there, 100,000 apps out there about mental health and suicide prevention. There's all those charities, but I needed to be in front of people. So what we decided to do was, number one, make it a paid service. So the construction companies pay us, and that's based on their employee base. So the more people you employ, it's per person per month, and that's negotiable depending on what package they want. But they pay us on a monthly basis over a 3-year period. So it's a sustained period. And what we then do is we go in and onboard all of their staff. We get them to download the app with a special introductory code. So we go in, we show them how to onboard it, because some people are not sure how to do that sort of stuff still on the site. Yeah. We not only show them how to onboard, we then show them how to use it, why to use it, when to use it, also where to use it, because mobile phones on site, by the way, are one of the biggest causes of accidents. So it's important to show them where to use it as well, but also a little bit of suicide prevention in there. So spotting the signs of all the things me and you spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
And so it's a full service. The app is the support network, and it can just manage that, and we can take the data from it. It's completely anonymous for the users.
Yeah.
So the information will go into their business, but it won't go in as Dave said this, or Dave said that, or Dave's struggling with this. It just goes across as you've got 1,000 employees, and there seems to be a trend that says people are pressing the unhappy button. Mm-hmm. Right? It might say out of 1,000 people, you've had 400 users, and 150 of those have pressed the unhappy button. So let's get into site and let's go and tackle it. So it's about that prevention. Let's get onto site and ask the questions.
Yeah. So you want to kill it at source, really, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Is it only construction companies you're rolling this out to?
No, so rolling it out to construction industry, 100%. That's where I want to be. Yeah. 749 suicides in the construction industry. Yeah. That it used to be 2 every working day. Now that number's pushing 3 every working day, and it's also about collaboration. With other charities that are working on it as well. So I've also created something which is going to be called the iTalk Charity Index, which we're going to launch next year to give charities a platform as well. So it's basically a trip advisor for charities.
Yeah.
So we're launching that next year as well. That's I'm hoping that'll go well. I don't think it's the first of its kind, but certainly we just want to add it to our platform. So we're going to be doing that. But collaboration between the charities with iTalk and the construction industry, but then also whether it be the sporting industry, the education industry, this method is transferable across all sectors.
Yeah.
There's no limitations. You can go to the financial industry,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think every company should have it personally. Every big company anyway. Do you think you will eventually provide counselling service within it?
Yep. So we're speaking to a few people, and one of the things is we've got the Samaritans who are ready. So there'll also be a 24-hour helpline on there, right. Easily pushed. So if you're at that moment, there's going to be that on there. We're going to have there's also something called Shout, which is a 24-hour text service. So one of the things we're also part of the subscription is we're providing as all part of the subscription is banners and posters for the inside toilet doors. And this is a strange one. When we done the research, people wanted to put the posters above the urinals or above the toilets. And if you was on the edge of taking your own life and you went up to scan a QR code and you drop your phone in the toilet, that could be the moment. So we want them on the back of doors so they're away from the actual toilet. Yeah. We've had to think about this, you know. So it's but you know, some people may not want to speak on a phone, so that's why we're going to have the 24-hour text service on there, and that'll all be part of it as well through Shout, who have been brilliant. They've been patient with us while we build this.
Yeah.
So we've got that as well going on. So then there's the index, which will actually signpost people. So, you know, we can't fix anybody and we can't help fix them if we don't know what's wrong.
Yeah.
So people have got to tell us. It's no good us assuming just because you're sad you've got a drink problem or you've got a drug problem or, you know, you're suffering from domestic violence. You know, we need to know what's wrong to be able to signpost you in the right direction. So there's some short questions that people will answer, and they go on and just answer them. It's made nice and easy. You know, there's not too much description in there, but we can then identify what's the best charity to send them to.
Yeah. So
then the charities, and part of the subscription fee is we're putting a large part of the money received into all the charities that help us. So actually, you know, they're not doing it for nothing, and that's important as well to make it sustainable.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The only risk with that is, as we mentioned earlier, I mean, is the system broken? Are these charities going to be able to help all these people? Or is it going to be another case of mind not being able to help you? You know what I mean?
Well, that is a danger, and that's why what we've done is we've got a bank, and we're working on it now. We're trying to collate we haven't spoken to all the charities, but we intend to speak to as many as possible and get them on board, because ideally what we want is for them to get an answer.
Yeah.
You know, so someone's listening, because when you're struggling, you want someone to listen, as you identified earlier, so that we'll then know that they've interacted with that charity.
Right.
And if that charity doesn't respond for whatever reason, it's not the charity's fault.
Yeah.
Then we need to know very, very quickly. We can forward that on to the next one and the next one and so on. Yeah. And that's another reason for the charity index, to get the reviews.
Yeah.
You know, so when people start going on there, going, immediate response, you know, they got back to me within 2 hours, 8 hours, 3 days, wherever it is, you know, they were really helpful, really nice. That stuff then within the AI and the algorithms within the app, that then feeds up the chain. So actually, you know, these charities then help us. They help us, they help the people that are needed, and they help themselves, because obviously we're filtering some of that money back to them. Yeah,
wicked. Is it going to be, do you think there's going to be like a community within people, like public? Would be like, you know, you get like your forums or anything like that. Would there be anything like that in there, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, that's what we want to do. I want to create a movement.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, I've spoken to now, I've been speaking to people who have been actively involved in Parliament, as we've spoken about, and I won't obviously give any names at the moment, but we want to create, you know, a movement of people, and that's only going to come through doing these podcasts. You know, whether 2 people listen to it or 2,000 people listen to it, you know, it's getting people together, getting them to sign up, you know, on our Facebook page, on our LinkedIn page. Go and look for iTalk. They're private groups.
Yeah.
But we can create. They're only small at the moment. As I said to you earlier, we've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, and it's no good sitting there thinking about these things. You know, we need to actually start doing something, and that's the important part. And that's really what we're on. So yes, there will be communities. Yes, there will be forums, and yes, there will be this movement I want to create that actually gets blokes talking to each other and start saving lives.
Wicked. But it's not actually live yet, is it?
No, it's not live yet. We're weeks away rather than months now, which is brilliant.
Okay. Yeah.
So the website will be done. We've just had the first draft come through today of the new website. So we've got the new website done. The app over the next 4 to 6 weeks will be live. And then it's going to be learning as we go as well, because people are going to need different things.
Yeah.
You know, it's no good going out going, okay, we've got all these facilities and applications we can use in an app, and actually no one uses them, you know, because they need something else. So we need users to use it, and then we want them to come to us and say, have you thought about adding this? Or, you know, why is that in there? That don't make sense, you know, and things like that, because this is about people.
Yeah.
You know, and it's no good I'm certainly not the expert. You know, I'm not the all singing, all dancing expert here. I'm putting together a vehicle that's going to help people, you know, but I need someone to keep the tyres blown up. I need someone to put the oil in the engine. We need this information in there from the users to be able to keep it evolved and keep it up to date.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I mean, it's the way the world is going, isn't it, with technology, apps, and I mean, they're so easy to use these days, aren't they?
If we can prevent suicide at source, so when these problems begin, so as I was talking about earlier, those life experiences, whether it be financial, whether it be alcohol, whatever it is, if we can help just resolve some of those problems before people get to that, we're going to prevent, suicides on site. I mean, there's a statistic I learned recently where you're 10 times more likely to die by suicide on site than you are by a physical accident.
Yeah.
The construction industry has cleaned its act up massively when it comes to safety on sites. If you go on any site, whether it be a HS2, any big site, I'm not talking about your normal domestic little jobs here, go on any big site, they're the cleanest they've ever been. They're the safest they've ever been. Listen, stuff happens, and accidents happen, and, that's not a good thing. But in the main, they're safer than they've ever been. Yet you're 10 times more likely to die by suicide than a physical accident on site. And that's not good. That needs addressing.
Yeah, it really does. It's weird because I spoke to you the other day, and I said to you that morning, I got on site, we had a bit of a briefing. There was a project manager there, and I told him about what I do and that sort of stuff, and he said, my last job I was on, went on site in the morning, see the geezer hanging from the steel, like, he'd had problems with his girlfriend and she jogged him on or whatever. And I think, that is it. That is it. I mean, it's mainly, they say, the main problems are money and partners, like relationship problem. I mean, and you're dealing with that sort of thing, helping people out, giving advice and that sort of thing, which is great.
It really is. Like I say, these life experiences, there are problems. They're things, you're running around playing on your BMX at school, or these days, they're gaming online, and then all of a sudden you're in a real world of at work, and we're talking about construction here. Suddenly you're on a building site. You're 17, 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. You've probably got a bit more money than you've ever been used to in some cases. Suddenly you've got a couple of £100 in your pocket. As you said earlier, the girlfriend's jogged you on, and you're now like, well, hang on a minute, I'm going to the pub and I'm starting to get on it. Then you meet a couple of other people, so have a go on this stuff, mate. And before you know it, you're out of control.
Yeah.
And it easily happens, and it can stem back from way early on. It weren't just the girlfriend getting rid of you. Why did she get rid of you?
Yeah.
And you got to start looking. If we can make people understand and be a bit more grown up, not wanting to stifle your life and say, right, okay, you're only having 1.5 pints when you go in the pub, and don't say this, don't do that. It's not about that. It's just actually understanding some life challenges.
But it's about not burying your head in the sand, isn't it? Like what you did way back in the day.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I can tell you now, that's from experience, that's not the way forward.
No, definitely not. And it can take a lot to break out of that. Yeah. So if you, if I was to ask you one thing you'd say to someone secretly struggling with mental health, you'd probably say the obvious answer would be to talk to someone, wouldn't it? Yeah. But what else? What other piece of advice would you give?
Big thing now, and this is a real tough one for people to do, and I encourage everybody to do this. There's science out there, there's evidence out there to say this really, really works. But if you see someone struggling, first of all, ask them the direct question. Ask them, are they having suicidal thoughts? Have they thought about suicide? And that's really tough.
Yeah,
that is really, really tough. And listen, if they come back to you with a yes, which you've got to be prepared for, if they come back with a yes, then you start listening to why, but you're not the answer. Don't try and fix it. You're not the answer, So first of all, if you're not having trouble, going back to my 3 and 4 people, that's the ones that are, the bigger group of people, ask a direct question. There's training out there, the Suicide Prevention Alliance, which I'm actually going to post about next week, where there's a 25-minute training, free training, which you can do. And it teaches you how to deal with that situation. It's really, really good, and that saves lives. That is a massive, massive part of it. So if you're struggling, me telling you to reach out and speak to someone it's not hypocritical at all, but I don't think you're going to listen. I don't think you're fully going to hear me saying to you, listen, if you're struggling, why don't you speak to your doctor? If you're struggling, why don't you speak to Dave or, your wife or something, or your dad. You're not gonna do that. In a lot of cases, you don't do that. As blokes, we don't. However, if you are struggling, you've got a friend, start to dip your toe in the water with them. Tell them that you've had a bit of an issue. And if you can do that, you'll be surprised how much it helps. It really would.
Yeah.
I'm not saying reach out. I'm not a fan of the phrase reach out. But actually, he's a really, if you can do it, that does help. You know what I mean? It does help.
Yeah. You do talks from construction site, and you mentioned earlier you do talks in schools as well.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, we do. The talks I do, I always get, I do a little question and answer at the end, little Q&A at the end of every talk, where I can get people to ask me any question, because when I tell my story, there's people there with questions. There's so many, and when you talk to kids from 12 to 15 sometimes, and you've told them this story, bearing in mind they're seeing things in their lives that are far worse than what happened to me. In my opinion, the struggle some kids are going through, and then they stand you up in front of them, and they think you're inspirational, but you're not. You're just answering their questions for them, and you're empowering them to actually think about themselves a little bit and give them the inspiration they need to either change something or go and get help. And that's the real crux behind what I do. And there was one particular kid I spoke to. I think he was 12 at the time. I didn't know the kid. And I always ask, what does depression mean to you when we do the talks at schools? And he said that depression's like being in a cardboard box with the lid closed and just a little hole to look out of, from a 12-year-old.
Right, honestly.
Right. Now, there's a whole story behind why he said that, and we got into it. But I was like, a 12-year-old could put that statement on the back of what does depression mean to you. Yeah. That's sad.
Yeah, it really is. But you tapped into that person. So even if you tap into one person on each talk you go to, that's a bonus, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I think I've alluded to a story before. I knew a guy. When I say I knew him, I didn't know him at the time, and he was struggling with his work, and I helped him through his work. For 3 months, 6. When I say helped him, I was just there listening and coaching him through a couple of bits and pieces, just because I was that much older and I could. And anyway, he once I launched my book, he attended the book launch for me, and he drove a long way. This guy, and this was on a Thursday night, and on the Saturday he started texting me, and as he was texting me, he was telling me about his childhood and how he was beaten by his dad and his wife was beaten. But he'd already read my book, and he said to me, "Look, I'm going to go to the doctors. I'm going to go and get myself sorted." And I was so proud that my book had inspired him to go and get help. And then over a period of time, he then started telling me the full story. And his full story was this: on that Thursday, which was April the 12th, when I launched my book, he had his suicide notes written to his wife and kids. He had a stash of pills, a stack load of alcohol, and he was taking his own life that weekend. He read my book and then didn't, and now he's doing well for himself. Him and his family are doing great, and you can't put a price on that. For me, it's one of the greatest rewards I've ever received. Him phoning up and telling me that story, how it was just amazing. And if I can do that once, and then why can't I go and do it 10 times, 100 times? Like I say, there is no amount of money that can buy that feeling. Even telling you now, getting the goosebumps come up on me, telling the story.
So I mean, in that respect, it's not a job for you, is it? This isn't a job. This is like your purpose, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I have to put it down as a quest. This is, I want to go out and save lives. Myself and my friend Paul Vittles. We often talk about bringing that suicide number down in the UK. Globally, if you could. And I'm just starting with the construction industry. When they do their next report, the Office of National Statistics, when they do their next report, if it's not 749 and it's 600 and something, then I feel like we're working, all of us, not just me, all of us that are doing this are having an impact. And that's the real benefit of doing what I do. When I stand up there in front of people and share my story, it's not look at me. It's look at yourself. Take a lesson from what I've been through and change your world. And that's what it's about. It's having that impact on people. Saving lives is, honestly, there is no better reward.
Yeah, you mentioned there that you're starting with the construction. I was going to ask, actually, because I know you're a big campaigner for mental health in construction. I was going to ask why you chose construction in particular. Is it because of the higher suicide rates in construction purely because of
Yeah,
that.
I mean, when I first left school, I was a sign writer by trade, and I used to end up on a lot of building sites, digging holes, putting signs up, digging the holes, putting the post in, and things like that. And I loved the environment, And then I got into sales, and most of my sales jobs have revolved around the construction industry. And it's just even now with the last 7 or 8 years and 9 years at Hilti, but the last 7 or 8 years being in the tool hire industry, still construction related. I'm still on sites, and I feel you need a leg up sometimes. There's chippies out there that come out of school. Their dad was a chippy, their uncle was a chippy, their granddad was a chippy, so I'm a chippy. But no one's shown you how to manage your money. No one's shown you how to, look after yourself physically and mentally, And it's that side of things that I think we want to do, and I want to help people with because it'll stop them. Listen, if in 10 years' time no one needs us, then fantastic. You know what I mean? There would be a dream.
This is the thing. I mean, there's not enough of it in school, really. They're doing it better in school now, like life skills and that, but there's not enough of that in schools, really, like finance, how to manage your money, how to do this, how to do that. And I think that should be a bigger thing, really, personally, having kids
Massively,
myself.
yeah. I mean, look, when I was growing up in school, I wasn't getting the exam results I wanted. I wasn't particularly well. When I say I weren't well behaved, I wasn't bad in school. I was just always messing around, larking around, not taking too much notice. And then I went on a YTS, to be a sign writer. I'd done a year on what was called a YTS back then, So, but I didn't choose to do that when I was at school. It was sort of forced upon you. What do you want to do? Well, I actually wanted to be a graphic designer. That's what I wanted to be.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
And I ended up being a sign writer,
Right.
So
Yeah.
which involved a bit of paint and a pencil or things like that every now and then. But quite often you come out of school not knowing what you want, and it's probably even tougher now because of the digital age we're in. Those the factories and the warehouses that we used to be able to go to for just to get a job.
Yeah.
Was there's a lot of them that are non-existent now. So it's tough, and why I think the construction industry needs people to come through school and go straight into the construction industry. We need more of those.
Yeah. There's not enough trades out there.
Curriculum.
There's not enough trades. There's not quite enough apprenticeships either. It's getting better with apprenticeships, but there's not quite enough of those. But yeah, you are. I mean, when I left school, I didn't know how to manage my money at all. I was left a bit of money through my parents had saved up to in like a fund, and then as soon as I got it and I was 18, I was like, "Whoa!" All got spunked. Get the beers in, lad. You know what I mean? And that's it. It was all gone, and I was in debt. Yeah. So, exactly what you mentioned earlier. Yeah. So, no, honestly, it's a wicked thing you're doing. It really is. So, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. I know it's a bit late now. So what I'm going to do some quick fire questions. Just a little bit of fun. Just a little bit of fun. I'll do at the end of each one. I haven't got too. I couldn't think of too many for you because you pretty much answered most of them anyway. But we'll do that, and then we'll go on to where people can find you. Yeah. So let's start some. Don't think about it too much. So what's your favourite type of music?
I would say country or rock.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't mind a bit country. Yeah.
My daughter's a country singer, so.
Oh, is she?
Yes, I've learned to like country a lot more over the last few years.
Do you want to give her a plug?
Shannon Elaine Music on whatever social media platforms there is out there. So
there you go.
Yeah, that's where my love of country music's come from.
Cool. What's your biggest fear? Falling. Okay. Yeah. You've answered this one. If you had to choose between going through the breakdown or stone again, you choose to be stabbed again. Yeah, fair play. If you saw your attackers being brutally attacked, would you try and help them?
You know what? Yeah. That's how I am as a person. Yeah, I would.
You've got closure now, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
What makes you uncontrollably smile?
Questions like that. You know what? Seeing people around me happy.
Yeah.
That's what I love.
What's the end goal?
The end goal: save more lives and retire early. I'm 56, nearly 57. If I can get a choice from a work point of view, by the time I'm 60, 61, maybe 62, even if it was 64, it means I retired early, and that would be a nice goal to achieve. That's the ultimate dream.
Yeah, I'd have some of that, definitely. Even if this cause takes you further than that age?
100%. Listen, I think I've said earlier, I want the iTalk Foundation, so I want to create a foundation so that a large part of the business doesn't just go into the charities; it also goes into the future.
Yeah.
And it's my legacy. So, maybe I'll hand the business down to the kids, and they can carry on with it. In the meantime, I can carry on with the foundation. That can take me into my 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
As I stand here now, sit here now, I don't see me stopping really, but it would just be nice to say I've retired from full-time work.
Yeah, because your kids help out, don't they? Or your boy helps out in particular.
Yeah, well, both of them do really. My daughter does a lot with me social media for me, although I've learned a lot more, so I'm doing more myself. And my son absolutely helps me 100%. He's my sounding board as well.
Yeah.
Because there's times when I'm talking to a different generation.
Yeah.
So what I say to you and then what I say to him needs to be two different things sometimes. And he's the one that keeps me on a level ground, and he'll 100% tell me when I'm wrong. He hasn't got a problem with that.
Which isn't often though, is it? Surely you ain't wrong.
No, especially as I'm one of his drinking partners in a pub, so he doesn't tell me too often.
Okay, so where can people find you?
Rightio. So right now we've got a new website which will be live, I'm hoping within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Which will be iTalkMH.com. And also at the moment it's DarrenBarden.com out there, but that's going to be closed down for the new one. Right. Any form of social media, check out iTalkMH or Darren Barden, and you'll get the same post on all of those. So whether you're Instagram, LinkedIn, I predominantly do LinkedIn, and then Facebook as well. I'm working on. I can't get me around Twitter and X or whatever it's called now. That's a bit too fast for me. and I've yet to step into the TikTok world, although I've been threatening to do it. So.
Oh yeah, same. I've been thinking about. People keep saying to me about the content. Oh, do TikTok. Everyone loves it, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm a little bit old school myself. I can't get my head around it all. So it's just another thing to try and figure out. Thinking, but yeah, we'll get there. But yeah, I'll leave all the links in the description. I might have to get the Facebook link from you because I'm not on Facebook, so I'll get that from you. So to talk to the audience, go out and buy the book. It was great. I've read it. It's a great read. You can get it on Amazon. I'll leave the link to that in the description. We'll hold it up for a sec one more time so people can see what it looks like. Let's get to the good bits. So you're in the good bits now, aren't you?
Absolutely. I was lucky enough. I don't know if you know a band called the Rizzle Kicks.
Yeah.
And they had a song called "Let's Skip to the Good Bits." Yeah. And I was at Celebrity Juice, watching Celebrity Juice in the studio one night, and I got to meet Jordan from the Rizzle Kicks.
Oh wow!
And I've got a photo of me and him and the book, which is really cool. It was like that's one of those cool moments. So
yeah, I'll see that on Instagram actually. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, wicked. Yeah, so that's probably elevated things a little bit for you as well.
Absolutely, he's got his own things he's working on. So
yeah. Also, to everyone out, any businesses, companies out there, sign up to iTalk MH. I mean, you've heard how great it is. When it goes live, you've got a live date?
Well, now we're aiming for November the 14th. Yeah. Where we can actually be in front of customers showing them. And the reason we've gone with November the 14th, that's International Men's Day, International Men's UK Day. And we want to do something around that date if we can. Yeah. So that's going to be, obviously, I don't want to set a date in at the moment because we're still working in the background with a few things. Yeah. But hopefully we should have it up and running and certainly in front of customers by that date.
So in hindsight, really, I'm a little bit premature doing this now, and I could have done with it when all that was live, really, wasn't it? Well,
yeah, I think, you know what, I thought about this before we spoke, and actually, I think the answer is no. I think we're doing it right because we're stimulating a bit of interest. There are other ways of getting to, but listen, there's loads of free organisations, there's loads of free charities, free apps, I mean, all brilliant and all worthwhile. I'm just doing it a little bit different because, as you would have seen, I'm a little bit different. And, I want to go out and interact with people. I want that face-to-face, that human-to-human interaction, which is needed. It's not just a digital product. It's actually a service. Yeah. And I think that's how we're going to save lives.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because, it's good that you're the face. And it's good that you're getting yourself out there, like you say, doing these talks and meeting people because they can see what's behind the brand and have someone to relate to where you've lived it. You get these things in these organisations where you don't know who you're talking to. That could be anyone, but they know that you've lived it, you've experienced it, you know what you're talking about, you've felt it. So it's gains a little bit of trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, I've sort of shied away from a lot of the training side of things. Not because I know better than anybody else. That's not the case. I just when I talk, I want it to come from the heart.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is why I signpost people to various organisations because I'm not the expert. All I'm telling people is this is what I done,
Yeah.
and this is how I coped and what I achieved. And
Yeah.
if they can look at me and go, you know what, they've got problems. Whoever it is can look at me and say, well, if he can come through that and do what he's doing now, then there's hope for them. And that's the big thing. Give someone hope. That reduces the suicide rates.
Yeah, wicked, mate. Good man. I love it. Well, thanks very much for your time, Darren. I've really, really appreciated it, honestly. These
No
things,
problem.
I mean, I know I do a construction thing and I do a crane thing, but these things are what I live for. These things are what make me tick. So it's
Good,
wicked. And
good.
if we can do anything together in the future, I'd love to.
I'm sure we will, mate. I'm sure
Yeah.
we will.
Top
Thank you for
man.
having me.
Keep up the good work, yeah? Cheers.
Excellent. Cheers, mate. Thank you very
Cheers.
much.